The 48 hours that changed Wembanyama's image. Victor Wembanyama did not just lose an NBA Finals series. He walked straight into the loudest, coldest, most public reality check of his young career. In less than 48 hours, the player many people had already crowned as the future face of basketball became the center of a storm that had nothing to do with highlights, blocks, or box scores. It was about respect, it was about pride, and it was about what happens when a young superstar loses on the biggest stage, then watches the team that beat him celebrate like they had been waiting all series to say exactly how they felt. The New York Knicks had just ended a 53-year championship drought. Madison Square Garden's pain, New York's frustration, decades of jokes, heartbreak, and failed rebuilds were finally buried under one trophy. Jalen Brunson was no longer just the leader of a tough playoff team. He was the Finals MVP, the man who carried New York through pressure, contact, chaos, and one of the most emotionally charged finals matchups the NBA had seen in years. But the celebration did not stay clean for long. Less than a day after the Knicks closed out the Spurs, a private celebration clip started spreading across the internet. Brunson was inside a Manhattan club, surrounded by teammates, friends, and people who had just lived through the same brutal series with him. The room was loud, the energy was wild. And then came the chant that turned a championship party into a national NBA debate. Suddenly, the story was no longer just about the Knicks winning. It was about whether they had crossed the line by turning Victor Wembanyama into the target of their celebration. And before that fire could even cool down, Mikal Bridges added gasoline. On Instagram Live, Bridges started talking about the final moments of Game 5, when Jeremy Sochan was thrown into the game cold with one impossible job: stand in front of Wembanyama and survive the possession. Bridges laughed, stretched the moment out, and turned Wemby's name, size, and reputation into part of the joke. To Knicks fans, it sounded like release. To Spurs fans, it sounded like disrespect. To the rest of the NBA, it sounded like the beginning of a rivalry that might not calm down for years. But here is the part most people are missing. This was not random. This was not just a team getting carried away after winning a title. This was the emotional explosion after 5 games of pushing, grabbing, taunting, missed calls, hard contact, and silent resentment. The Knicks did not wake up after the finals and decide to mock Wembanyama for no reason. In their eyes, they had survived him. They had survived the elbows, the stare downs, the physical battles, the no calls, and the tension that kept building every single night. And Wembanyama, he stayed quiet. No direct response. No public clapback. No emotional statement, just silence from the same player everyone expected to become the NBA's next unstoppable force. That silence only made the story louder, because now fans are asking the real question. Is Victor Wembanyama calmly waiting for his moment to answer? Or did the Knicks expose something deeper about how he handles being humbled? Before we break down every moment that led to this, tell me where you are watching from. Are you in New York, San Antonio, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, or somewhere outside the United States? Drop your city in the comments. And if you think the Knicks were justified after everything that happened in this series, press 1. If you think they went too far disrespecting Wembanyama after the win, press 2. Also, subscribe right now, because this story is not finished. It is only getting started. The celebration that turned into a warning shot, the first clip did not look like a polished media moment. That was exactly why it hit so hard. There was no podium, no sponsor backdrop, no careful answer from a player trying to sound professional. It was just Jalen Brunson in a private Manhattan celebration, surrounded by the people who had just gone through the most exhausting basketball fight of their life. The Knicks had beaten the Spurs, taken the championship, and ended a drought that had haunted New York basketball for more than 5 decades. For one night, they were not trying to be diplomatic. They were not trying to make San Antonio feel better. They were releasing everything they had been holding in since the series turned personal. That is why the video exploded. Fans were not just reacting to a few words from a party. They were reacting to what those words revealed. The Knicks locker room clearly did not view Victor Wembanyama as just another defeated opponent. They saw him as the center of everything they had to survive. Every hard screen, every tense possession, every awkward collision. Every moment where the game felt like it was one whistle away from boiling over, all of it came back in that celebration. And when Brunson stood in the middle of that room, the energy around him made one thing clear. New York felt like it had earned the right to talk. For Knicks fans, that clip became a trophy within the trophy. It sounded like a city finally breathing after 53 years of frustration. For Spurs fans, it sounded like the champions had gone too far. They saw a veteran-led team mocking a young superstar after he had just carried San Antonio to the finals earlier than anyone expected. To them, Wembanyama was not a villain. He was a 20-something franchise player who had lost a brutal series and was being humiliated while the basketball world watched. But that split reaction is exactly what made the moment powerful. Great NBA rivalries are not built on everyone agreeing. They are built on two fan bases watching the same clip and seeing two completely different stories. New York saw revenge. San Antonio saw disrespect. Neutral fans saw the beginning of something bigger than one championship celebration. And the most dangerous part for Wembanyama was not even the chant itself, it was the confidence behind it. The Knicks did not sound afraid of him anymore. They sounded like a team that had looked directly at the NBA's future, taken every hit, survived every run, and walked away with the ring. That changes the psychology of a rivalry. Once a young superstar loses the fear factor, he has to win it back. Mikal Bridges turned the pressure into comedy. If Brunson's celebration clip was the spark, Mikal Bridges' Instagram Live was the gasoline. By the time Bridges went live, the championship party had already become a league-wide argument. Everyone was asking whether the Knicks had crossed the line. Everyone was waiting to see if someone from New York would calm things down. Instead, Bridges leaned straight into the chaos and gave fans another moment to replay, dissect, and argue about. He started talking about the final seconds of Game 5, when Jeremy Sochan was thrown into the game with almost no rhythm and no real time to settle in. That assignment was simple on paper, but terrifying in reality. Stand in front of Victor Wembanyama, do not foul, do not panic, do not give up a clean look, and do it with the championship hanging in the air. Bridges told the story like it was half strategy, half comedy. He praised Sochan for accepting the moment, but the way he framed it made Wembanyama the punchline. Not because Wemby was weak, but because guarding him had become this almost absurd task that everyone understood was dangerous. That is what made the live stream so effective. Bridges did not need to scream. He did not need to make a long speech. He just laughed about the pressure, stretched out the names, exaggerated the situation, and let viewers feel what the Knicks had felt in real time. Wembanyama was not just tall. He was not just skilled. He was a problem so unique that a player could be thrown into the game cold and immediately become part of NBA folklore just for surviving one possession. But comedy has layers. Underneath the jokes, Bridges was sending a message. The Knicks were saying, "We dealt with him, we solved the problem." That is a dangerous message for a player like Wembanyama, because so much of his early career image depends on being unsolvable. He is supposed to be the mismatch nobody can prepare for, the impossible body with guard skills, the future of the league standing above everyone else. Yet here were the Knicks laughing after the series like they had cracked the code. To Spurs fans, Bridges sounded disrespectful. To Knicks fans, he sounded honest. And to Wembanyama, whether he admitted it or not, it had to land somewhere. Because when another team starts turning your aura into a joke, the next meeting is no longer just basketball, it becomes a test of pride. That was the second public hit in 2 nights. First Brunson, then Bridges. Different voices, same message. New York had won the title, but they were not done winning the story. The moment this rivalry was really born. To understand why the Knicks reacted with that much edge, you have to go back to Game 3. That was the night the series stopped feeling like a finals matchup and started feeling like a grudge match. New York had control, San Antonio was desperate, and Wembanyama came out with a level of aggression that told everyone he was not going to let the Spurs disappear quietly. He attacked the paint, challenged bodies, played through contact, and carried himself like a young superstar trying to change the entire tone of the series. Then came the possession that lit the fuse. Brunson was working through traffic, trying to create space in the middle of all that playoff congestion. Wembanyama got tangled with him. There was contact, there was grabbing. There was the kind of physical fighting that happens in every finals game, but rarely becomes the main story. Then suddenly, Brunson hit the floor. The cameras caught enough for fans to freeze the footage, argue over angles, and build 2 completely different versions of the truth. Knicks fans saw Wembanyama put his hands high and send their leader down in a way that looked unnecessary. Spurs fans pointed to the jersey contact before it and argued Brunson was not innocent either. The officials did not catch the full moment in real time, and that only made everything worse. Once a whistle is missed in a finals game, the internet becomes the replay center. Everyone slows it down, everyone chooses a side. Everyone becomes convinced their version is the only honest one. But the most important part was not just the contact, it was the reaction after it. Wembanyama did not look shaken. He did not look apologetic. To New York, he looked almost amused. That image stayed with the Knicks. Brunson got back up, kept his composure, and did not hand San Antonio an easy, emotional win in the post-game press room. But silence does not always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it means a player is saving the response for the score. From that moment forward, every possession carried extra weight. Every box out looked sharper. Every screen felt heavier. Every Wembanyama touch came with a little more noise from the crowd and a little more irritation from the Knicks bench. The series had crossed a line that numbers could not explain. That was the night Wembanyama stopped being just the young giant trying to win his first championship. To the Knicks, He became the opponent who had pushed their leader, smiled through the tension, and forced them to answer in the only language basketball respects: winning. The series kept getting rougher. Game 3 did not end the drama. It opened the door for more. By Game 4, the physical tone had already been set, and both teams knew exactly what kind of series they were in. The Spurs were trying to stay alive. The Knicks were trying to close the door before Wembanyama could turn momentum into belief. That kind of pressure does not create clean basketball. It creates possessions where every inch of space feels personal. Wembanyama and Karl Anthony Towns got tangled around the perimeter, and another controversial contact moment followed. The officials reviewed the play and assessed it as a flagrant one. For New York, that was proof of what they had been saying all along. Wembanyama was not just playing hard, he was crossing the line too often. For San Antonio, it was another example of how impossible it is for a player that tall and that heavily defended to move through contact without every motion looking exaggerated. But in a final series, perception can matter as much as intent. Once a player develops a reputation inside a matchup, every future collision gets judged through that lens. Wembanyama was no longer getting the benefit of the doubt from Knicks fans. If he bumped someone, they saw a pattern. If he raised an arm, they saw danger. If he reacted emotionally, they saw immaturity. The series had turned him from a basketball miracle into a target of suspicion. Then came the taunting moments, the responses, the smaller confrontations that made the series feel more like a psychological test than a normal championship battle. Mitchell Robinson battled him in the paint. Towns absorbed contact. Brunson kept driving into spaces where bodies were waiting, and every time Wembanyama made a play, the Knicks seemed determined not to let him feel comfortable for more than a second. By Game 5, the tension had become part of the environment. The closeout game was tight, heavy, and nervous. Brunson was trying to finish a historic run. Wembanyama was trying to keep San Antonio alive. Every possession felt like it could become the clip everyone talked about the next morning. When Brunson rose for a jumper and Wembanyama's foot appeared close to his landing space, Knicks fans immediately added it to the list. No call, more frustration, more fuel. That is why the celebration later sounded so sharp. The Knicks did not feel like they had simply beaten a talented young team. They felt like they had survived a series where every game came with another controversy, another argument, another reason to take it personally. And when teams take things personally in the finals, the final buzzer does not always end the fight. Sometimes it only changes the location. The handshake that never happened, the final horn in Game 5 should have been the clean ending. The Knicks had won. The Spurs had fallen short. The champions were pouring onto the floor. Families were rushing in. Teammates were grabbing each other, shouting, laughing, crying, trying to process that a 53-year wait had finally ended. In moments like that, the losing team usually faces the hardest walk in sports. The handshake line, it is not glamorous. It is not easy. It is not something any competitor wants to do after watching another team celebrate on their floor. But it matters. In the NBA, respect after defeat is part of the unwritten language. You look your opponent in the eye, you acknowledge the battle. You show the world that losing hurt, but it did not break your character. Wembanyama did not give the Knicks that moment. Instead, he left the floor and went toward the tunnel while the celebration continued behind him. That image became more damaging than any missed shot or rough possession. A superstar can have a bad game. A young player can lose control of emotion. A franchise cornerstone can make mistakes in the heat of competition. But walking away from the handshake line gave critics something much easier to attack. Maturity, that is why the backlash came so fast. Fans saw it as a sign that Wembanyama could dominate highlights, but still had to learn how to carry defeat. Analysts framed it as a leadership issue. Former players understood the pain of losing a championship, but many still argued that facing the winner is part of becoming great. The discussion shifted from how good is Wembanyama to is he ready for everything that comes with being the face of a franchise? That is a brutal shift for any young star. For most of his career, the conversation around Wembanyama had been built on wonder. His size, his skill, his defense, his ceiling, his once-in-a-generation talent. But after that walk to the tunnel, the conversation became more human and more uncomfortable. It became about pride, frustration, accountability, and the difference between being gifted and being ready. The Knicks noticed, Brunson noticed, the fans noticed, and whether Wembanyama wanted it or not, that moment gave New York even more control over the narrative. They had beaten him on the floor, then watched him leave before offering the symbolic respect that champions expect. That is why the celebration clips hit with so much force afterward. To New York, Wembanyama had not just lost. He had walked away from the chance to lose with grace, and in a league where memory lasts forever, that kind of image does not disappear quickly. The league started judging Wembanyama differently. Once the handshake controversy hit the internet, the story escaped both locker rooms. It was no longer just Knicks fans and Spurs fans arguing. It became a national NBA conversation. Podcasts picked it up, debate shows pushed it harder. Former players started weighing in, and suddenly, Wembanyama was facing the first true character debate of his career. That matters because young superstars are usually protected by potential. When they win, everyone calls it destiny. When they lose, people say they are learning. But this was different. The criticism was not just about missing shots, getting outplayed, or failing to close a series. It was about how Wembanyama responded when basketball finally humbled him. That is a much tougher conversation to escape. Draymond Green's reaction became one of the loudest because he spoke from the perspective of someone who knows championship pressure, rivalry, trash talk, and emotional control better than almost anyone. His message was simple: there is a way to win, and there is a way to lose. You do not have to smile after getting your season ended. You do not have to pretend it does not hurt. But you do have to stand there, face the opponent, and understand that respect is part of the price of greatness. That kind of criticism cuts deep because it does not question Wembanyama's talent. It questions his readiness. And for a player expected to become the next face of the league, readiness is everything. Can he handle being mocked? Can he handle losing in public? Can he handle older champions turning him into motivation? Can he take a painful moment and turn it into growth instead of bitterness? The Knicks, meanwhile, looked stronger with every day that passed. Brunson had his championship. Bridges had his jokes. New York had its parade energy. And because Wembanyama stayed mostly quiet, the Knicks version of the story filled the silence. That is one of the oldest rules in media. If you do not define your own narrative, someone else will define it for you. For Spurs fans, the silence looked strategic. Maybe Wembanyama was refusing to feed the drama. Maybe he was choosing the mature path by not turning a celebration clip into a public war. But for critics, the silence looked like avoidance. They wanted him to say something, own something, push back against something. That is why this moment became so dangerous for him. In the NBA, the court decides champions, but the story decides reputations. And for the first time, Wembanyama was not controlling the story. New York was. Brunson won more than the trophy. Jalen Brunson's role in this story is bigger than one viral celebration. He became the symbol of everything the Knicks believed they had earned. He was the smaller guard who kept stepping into the paint against giants. He was the leader who absorbed contact, stayed composed in front of cameras, and kept producing when the series got tight. He was the player New York trusted when the game slowed down and every possession felt like it might decide history. That is why his finals MVP performance mattered so much. Brunson did not just win because he scored. He won because he gave the Knicks emotional stability in a series designed to shake them. Every time San Antonio threatened to turn the momentum, Brunson answered. Every time Wembanyama's presence made the game feel impossible, Brunson found a way to make the floor smaller, the moment calmer, and the Knicks more dangerous. Against a player like Wembanyama, that kind of leadership becomes even more valuable. Wemby can change shots without touching the ball. He can make players hesitate just by standing near the rim. He can turn normal driving lanes into bad decisions. But Brunson refused to play scared. He kept attacking angles. He kept using his body. He kept forcing the Spurs to react to him instead of letting the entire series revolve around Wembanyama's shadow. That was the real victory. The Knicks did not defeat the idea of Wembanyama by pretending he was ordinary. They defeated him by respecting the problem and solving it anyway. They threw bodies at him. They challenged him physically. They forced him into emotional moments. They made every catch uncomfortable. They turned a generational talent into part of a team problem instead of letting him become the entire story. And once the Knicks won, Brunson became the proof that experience, toughness, and composure can still beat raw, futuristic talent. That is why New York's celebration sounded so personal. It was not just arrogance. It was relief. The Knicks had spent the entire series being told Wembanyama was the future, that his size and skill would eventually overwhelm everyone, that this was only the beginning of his takeover. Then Brunson took the present from him. That is a powerful message in sports. The future may be coming, but it does not get handed the crown early. It has to earn it from the people already standing there. For Brunson, this championship changed his career forever. He is no longer just respected, he is validated. He went through the league's most hyped young superstar, survived the chaos around him, and came out holding the trophy. That is not just a win, that is legacy. The test waiting for Wembanyama. For Victor Wembanyama, this loss is no longer just about the scoreboard. It is the first real pressure test of his NBA image. Before this, finals. Most of the conversation around him was about potential, size, skill, defense, and the idea that he could become the next face of the league. But after the Knicks series, the conversation changed. Now, people are asking how he handles frustration, criticism, physical playoff pressure, and public embarrassment. That is where his next chapter began. If Wembanyama learns from this, the loss could become one of the most important moments of his career. He now understands that NBA opponents will not just admire him, they will test him. They will bump him, talk to him, frustrate him, and try to make him emotional before he can take over the game. The Knicks may have given the rest of the league a blueprint. Do not fear the aura, attack the composure. That means San Antonio has work to do too. The Spurs need veteran leadership around him, not just talent. They need voices in the locker room who can teach him how to lose with control, respond with maturity, and turn disrespect into discipline. Because if he comes back calmer, stronger, and more focused, this finals loss could become the moment that creates a scarier version of Wembanyama. But if he ignores the lesson, every rival will use this series against him. The next time he faces New York, it will not be just another game. It will be a test of growth, pride, and memory. What this rivalry really teaches us. This story is bigger than one celebration, one live stream, or one missed handshake. It is about the difference between talent and legacy. Talent gets you attention. Legacy is built by how you respond when the whole league questions you. The Knicks proved that experience, toughness, and unity can still beat hype. They waited 53 years for this championship, and when the moment came, they did not blink. Brunson became more than a scorer. He became the emotional center of a team that refused to be intimidated by the NBA's most talked about young superstar. Wembanyama, on the other hand, now faces the lesson every great player eventually meets. Being special is not enough. You have to win with class, lose with control, and carry pressure without letting it define you. This does not have to become a story of hate. The best rivalries are built on fire, but also respect. Competition should push players higher, not turn them colder. So the question now is simple. Will Wembanyama answer with words, or will he answer on the court? And will the Knicks keep using this as fuel the next time these teams meet? If you think the Knicks were justified, comment 1. If you think Wembanyama deserved more respect, comment 2. If you think this rivalry is just getting started, comment 3. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video with another NBA fan, because the next chapter of this story could be even bigger.